check in with the markets now. The local market once again closing flat, still in record territory though, with the rand back around 15 rand 60 to the US dollar. Gary Booysen is with Rand Swiss. He's been watching the markets. Let's have a quick chat with him. Gary, thanks indeed for talking to us. I mean, are we back first of all to normal trading volumes already? And if so, what's driving this initial part of January as far as the markets are concerned?
Thanks, David. So, yeah, trading volumes definitely picking up compared to the December period. And it seems that market participants are coming back to the market a little bit more quickly than they have in the past. Looking at the underlying market, we don't have a large degree of news flow coming out because we haven't yet started, especially internationally, the US earnings season, which will kick off on Friday with the likes of Citigroup and JP Morgan reporting. But yes, absolutely, people are back in action. We're seeing a nice big recovery in the resources this year. So we're seeing the likes of Sibanye-Stillwater up over 7%. Kumba also doing very well. But on the downside today, we had MTN falling. I don't know if that's got to do with some of the announcements around the Spectrum case with Telkom. We also saw Nedbank on the back foot down around 2%, and maybe that's because of their mention in the State Capture Commission, obviously them being flagged for potentially dodgy dealings with AXA.
Yeah, it's interesting, speaking about dodgy dealings there, Gary, another big story is Tonga Hewlett. I mean, it says it wants to pursue, what, a R500 million civil case suit against former employees that, were involved in underhanded accounting practices. I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? How far do you think they'll get with this one?
That's a good question. So, looking at, I suppose, South Africa, the prosecution of private directors is very, very difficult. So I don't know how far they are going to get with it. But certainly, I think if you look at the company, it's in pretty desperate straits. So the market cap is sitting at around 664 million. The civil claim is for 450 million. So more than half its market cap it could potentially be the value of that civil claim being processed. And if you look at it from that perspective, the market certainly doesn't think it's going to get far. Otherwise, they would be marking up the share price. Now, looking at Tongaat itself, obviously it was tarred and feathered along with the likes of Steinhoff and EOH in an accounting scandal that left a massive hole in its books. But at the same time, the operational assets in Tongaat are also under a little bit of pressure. Sugar prices, or at least sugar as a commodity, is a difficult one in I suppose, a healthier world. But at the same time, it's predominantly its operations are in KwaZulu-Natal, and it's still coming out of the impact of that civil unrest last year. Maybe there's a way that it could potentially pursue asset sales to try and patch it up, but really it's probably going to have a 4 billion rand rights issue is what it would ideally like to make it a going concern. And at this stage, survival is still a real question for Tongaat.
And then, Gary, before I let you go, you've sort of mentioned it in your first answer. I mean, this Spectrum issue, I see Vodacom now joining MTN against Telkom. And, of course, it's all got to do with what they call the delaying of this auctioning that was supposed to happen by ICASA. I mean, this is really, I think it's really undervalued, the role this plays in terms of turning our economy around. You've got to get Spectrum auctioning sorted out. And this is being delayed by the courts and by some of these different stakeholders in the entire equation. I mean, what do you see unfolding this year as far as the Spectrum issue is concerned, Gary? Just very quickly.
So you've got to remember, it's a very complex issue as well. So, the allocation of spectrum, if not done correctly, is going to have a detrimental effect. But, on the face of it, absolutely, we have to have spectrum released eventually. We just have to have it released in the right way. So, Telkom bringing the application really just to say that if MTN and Vodacom get the spectrum allocation they're looking for, especially in the 1 gigahertz band, this is really going to skew the competitive landscape for someone like Telkom, and it's going to be incredibly punitive. And, when you're dealing with large telcos like this, regulation is absolutely key to the success of their businesses. So at the same time, I take your point. If you can get the spectrum allocation done, you can't roll out a 4G and 5G network effectively just because of its concept called the densification without the spectrum being allocated. But at the same time, I get the sense this is not just ICASA twiddling its thumbs and a little bit of wrangling behind the scenes. There are real concerns around the way the spectrum is being allocated, and it needs to be allocated correctly. And I think that's clear.
All right, fair enough. Gary Booysen, thanks very much indeed with Rand Swiss there, giving us an idea on what happened on the market front. All right, let's take a look at those numbers now.